G'day and welcome back to Reality Check. I'm your host, Ross Coulthart, and this week we've got a friend of mine, someone I've been talking to for a very long time and who I've been trying to get on the show for a while, but I thought I'd give it a bit of time just to see how the dust settled. His name is Michael Herrera, and he's a former US Marine who was on deployment during a relief operation in Sumatra, Indonesia, near the city of Padang City, during a rescue operation, a relief operation in 2009. Mike, welcome to Reality Check.
Hey, it's good to see you, Ross, and good to be on Reality Check. And we've been looking forward to this for a while. So, a lot of mutual friends of mine, and it's good to finally meet your acquaintance with them.
Okay, so Mike, a lot of people watching this may be kind of familiar with the event that you've described. Essentially, you came across a bunch of mercenary paramilitary types who were clearly speaking with American accents in the company of a gigantic craft, a flying saucer of some kind, that presumably is under the operation and control of people connected to the United States. It's an intriguing story. You've been called a fraud. You've been called a grifter. You've been accused of all manner of things. You've even had some of your former colleagues in the Marines suggest it's all a BS story. Let me first start off by asking you, do you stand by the story that you're telling?
1,000,000%.
Would you testify if you were called to Congress?
I'm hoping I get called to Congress because I will testify to that 100% with that. And the fact is, I have other guys that were with me that have texted me about that after it happened. After I came forward, basically, talking about the situation to an extent, I tried to get them to help me with it, and to no avail. They weren't able to do that for understandable reasons, because again, being under the type of microphone and under the type of the public view anyway, that doesn't sit well with people. And having exposed myself to the public in that regard and being known as this it's not an easy thing for people to do, which is understandable. So I don't expect anybody to want to step out of the shadows and do that. It was hard for me to do it as it is, especially with the flack that I've gotten. But behind the scenes, I have helped out many other people who have been in similar situations that have gotten in touch with government officials to also let them know what they've experienced as well, which have been similar things that have happened, as well as with myself.
Now, what interests me about your case is it's part of a pattern of similar kind of cases. The other one I'm interested in is the Jonathan Wygant case, the Peruvian case, where a guy says he came across a UFO, and again, black-clad US paramilitaries who essentially pointed their weapons at him and arrested him. There's a pattern here, and generally what happens is the person making the allegation gets discredited. It becomes UFO law that you're just frauds and grifters, and that's the end of the story. Well, let me tell everybody, I think Michael Herrera is telling the truth. In fact, I know Michael Herrera is telling the truth. And moreover, not only do I think this, so does Jake Barber, who was another person who came forward earlier this year and spoke to NewsNation. There is an active cover-up going on inside the US government, the US military, and the intelligence community to suppress people like Michael Herrera and Jonathan Wygant. So I want to get, Mike, your story on the record definitively for Reality Check today. Tell me what happened from go, basically.
So this was in 2009. There was an earthquake that triggered a subsequent tsunami, which now is just yesterday, the same thing happened out near Russia. So that's kind of the theme. But this happened in 2009. Essentially, we were a part of Operation Gipson, which was supposed to be humanitarian relief in the Philippines because of a typhoon. Surprisingly, my ship, which was USS Denver, was the one that was rerouted out to the western part of Sumatra. and it was just us as a company of Marines. And granted, not every Marine got off on a ship to partake in this kind of operation. Um, where I fall into this is I was basically randomized and put into a random stick, and then basically said, you're going to go stand security for an hasty LZ so they can get stuff to basically land there and to provide, security so that way they can do that. Because the first thing you have to do when you're occupying an area is you have to have a security presence there. You can't just go in there and just, blindly land a helicopter and not think that they're going to be rebels, because Indonesia is the second largest terrorist capital in the world. So you do have to have precaution with that.
So let me just get first to the one issue that's been used to attack your credibility on this issue. You say that you were deployed as part of a stick or a small team of men who were sent to secure a landing location for a helicopter. Was one of your team, there's a guy who's come out publicly and attacked your credibility called Nathan. I won't use his last name, but he has basically suggested you are a liar, that you're a fraud, that this never happened. And moreover, he said that you were never deployed with weapons during this operation, so the whole thing's nonsense. What do you say about the allegations of Nathan?
Completely false. Just because he wasn't with me at that time doesn't mean it didn't happen, right? And the fact is I know distinctively because we were disarmed, and typically I didn't have an M16 as a normal standard issued weapon. I had an M249, which was a belt-fed machine gun. And for me to get issued an M16 was out of the norm for me. That was one of the things that stuck out, because it's like, okay, now I understand as a security operation of why they didn't want to have M249s. And two, it wasn't my personal weapon I was issued. I didn't have we usually have these weapons issue cards. And obviously I didn't use that to get an M16 because it wouldn't match up serial numbers or whatever. So they basically just gave us whatever weapons we needed to basically facilitate that, because we were some of the first people there,
And so this Nathan character, he was, I think, your platoon leader or one of your platoon leaders. You had worked with him as a Marine, but he was not deployed as part of your team on this day.
He was not on that team during that day, correct.
Yeah. Okay, so you fly in by chopper into a particular location. What happens?
So we basically egress a helicopter. We get into a 360 pattern, even though there's a team of 6 of us, but we try to cover as much ground with that as much as possible. When it leaves, basically where we were positioned was an open area that would have us stick out like a sore thumb. So what our method was basically, now the person in charge told us that we should get into the tree line, which was right up a slope. That way we're not sticking out like a sore thumb. We still have eyes on the objective. And if anything happens, we could basically intervene if need be. And that is basically when we were on top of that slope, we were facing south, which is where everything was basically going on. And then to the north is when we saw this anomaly. And that was down the slope, and we could only see a partial amount because the vegetation was obscuring the full picture of this thing. So the fact that it was changing colors and it looked very abstract stuck out like a sore thumb. So the person in charge at that time.
Can I just cut you off for a moment? Did you have a radio? A lot has been made of the fact that you allegedly didn't have a radio, and that was not normal operating procedure to be deployed like that without a radio.
I don't remember having a radio. I didn't ever carry a radio. That was not my job. We didn't have black gear either. That wasn't my job either. So the fact is, I don't remember the person in charge having a radio as well. So the fact is, I can understand why people get confused of that. But again, I don't remember us having any kind of comm equipment whatsoever.
Does it detract from the credibility of what you're saying that supposedly on normal operations you would be deployed with somebody with a radio?
Well, if it's a combat operation, absolutely. But again, this was more of haste. It just felt like it was more hasty and it was just rushed. I don't think it was necessarily planned as well as it should have, because you have only one ship going to an entire part of a country that is destabilized because of this natural disaster. You would have to, if you're trying to maintain adequate forces or help, I would figure you need more of a logistical support than just one ship. You know what I mean?
You see an anomaly. From the LZ, how distant is the object that you're looking at through the jungle?
So I would say, if I was to recall correctly, I would say probably several hundred meters. Like it was in, from where the LZ was to where the slope is. So if you're talking between where the target is, meaning that anomaly compared to where the LZ was, it was several hundred meters. But then again, there's vegetation that obscures everything. And two, I don't, when we're back in the helicopter, the only thing I remember is seeing out the back. I just remember seeing the ocean and seeing some land, basically trying to estimate what direction we went. I don't know specifically how high up we were flying, but I remember that we weren't flying very high at all. Basically we were getting to a point where we're not trying to, I'm assuming we were trying to skyline ourselves, but at the same time, we have enough ground to basically see what's going on. And that's when they basically made this decision to land here and make this a hasty LZ for us to basically provide security support to do so.
So, because your job is to protect the LZ because there's a chopper coming in with important relief supplies, you go over to investigate whatever the object is that you can see through the trees.
Correct. Which wasn't my decision. That was the person who was in charge of it. That was their decision.
What happens?
So we basically decide to go down the other side of this, and it's still thick vegetation, but at some point it ends up coming up to a clearing. And this is when we see this anomaly in its entirety. And it's rotating. It's like an octagonal design. It's got like a pyramid structure on the top of it. It's got a pattern to it that looks manufactured. You could tell it's got panels, it's got seams, it's got rivets, it's got stuff that is basically, you could tell it's manufactured and put together. But it was, when it was hovering, it wasn't making like a thruster sound from like a jet engine. It didn't make like a rotor type sound like a helicopter. It was just like an audible hum. And it was very faint at first, but then getting closer, it was kind of, got a little bit more intense, but it wasn't by much. And then when we started seeing this thing rotate, there was this platform that was underneath of it, and I thought maybe it was something of maybe concrete or something like that. But as we got close to this thing and saw in its entirety, we were intercepted by a team of 8 operators that were wearing no insignia, that were wearing all black. They had better weapon systems that we did that were newer. They had stuff for night vision capability on their weapons, which were basically M4s that were newer than ours. They had ACOGs, which were newer than ours. And they had PEC 16s, which were a little bit bigger than what we had as PEC 15s. So that's an IR illumination device for night vision, but it also has capabilities to basically use for your weapon system to basically accurately dial in and basically take out the threat if you need to use night vision.
Just slow down a bit. So they approach you as you're walking towards this object. How far away are you from the craft when you are intercepted by these 8 paramilitaries?
It had to be around 100 meters or so, give or take a few. But it was close enough where you can see this thing. And the estimate that I put is 300 feet. I mean, it was massive. I've never seen anything like that big.
Let's get a description, a really good description of the object. Size, shape.
So the size of this thing, I estimate to be about 300 feet in diameter. The shape of it was like octagonal, because I could see when it was rotating, you could see where the shadowing was affecting some of the areas that weren't basically reflecting part of the sun or whatnot. So you could see like the sections. And then I had like a scale pattern on this thing that it could have been a circular pattern, it could have been a octagonal, it could have been hexagonal. So again, we weren't that close enough to make out those fine details. There were these panels basically on all the ridges that were black, and it was like the blackest black that I've ever seen. And like you could shine a laser into this thing and it would basically absorb that light. And then being an octagonal shaped craft with 300 feet, I mean, that's pretty obvious to see something like that rotating. It's obviously not a building. It's not any kind of conventional aircraft that I've ever seen. And the fact that it didn't make any traditional noise for propulsion.
So just so I'm clear, you've got presumably some kind of disc saucer-shaped craft hovering above a platform below it, and there's no visible connection of any kind of constructed material between the platform and the craft above it.
No, I didn't see no change.
What's on the platform?
So as that's going on, when we got held up, there were some trucks that started to drive into the picture. And I had estimated there were Ford F-350s. They were that type. They could have been Toyota Tundras, but they didn't have any markings on them either. No logos of manufacturer, nothing. They were blacked out. They also had like off-roading capabilities. Like you could tell that these things were beefed up to handle that kind of terrain. And they had these containers that they were pulling that they were essentially loading onto the platform underneath this craft. And as that's going on, we're looking at the people that are holding us up because they're stripping us of our weapons or take the ammo out of our pouches, and they're threatening to kill us the entire time. They took our IDs out of our left breast pocket, which I don't know how these guys, unless, that was my speculation that these guys were U.S. military at one point because they knew where we kept our IDs, and they were also American, but the way that they moved, the way that they actually engaged us with the tactics they've had is something that's advanced, and it's something that it was well done enough to the point where you could tell they maybe rehearsed this, or they've done it quite a bit to where they knew exactly what to do at that point and how to deal with people who were armed like us.
Were these men showing any kind of ribbons, patches, identifying name patches, anything like that?
No, not a single thing.
What were they wearing? What kind of clothing?
Black clothing. I mean, something that you would see like a SWAT officer would wear, something along the lines of that. They have black bulletproof vests or flak jackets, and they were wearing ball caps. They didn't wear a Kevlar helmet or nothing like that. They were just regular baseball caps.
They were obviously armed. Did they show you any kind of ID? Did they express any kind of authorization other than pointing a weapon in your face?
Nope, they just said we weren't supposed to be there, and they started basically saying we could kill you. It's easy to get lost out in the jungle. The whole if I was to mess with somebody psychologically and I was to have them captive, I mean, we would have done the same thing too. It's just kind of like trying to play into it, but also figure out who these guys are, which clearly you can tell what Marines look like based off of our uniforms and our gear. But these guys, they obviously didn't want to be identified by any means with either insignias. Their dialects were like, U.S., like a normal United States person from the United States, just like how I talk. It was very similar to that. The lingo they were using was what made me also suspect that these people were also former military as well.
And so, how long were you held by this group of men for?
Had to be in 5-10 minutes or so, probably shorter than that.
And
there's only six of us.
So all through that time, you're also seeing these Ford trucks coming up with something being towed behind them up onto this platform.
Yes, that's correct. And these were containers. These were some containers, kind of looked like a type of shipping container that had an HVAC system on the top of it. And when I first came forward and when I first talked to Senate Intel and testified to AARO, I thought it was them running drugs. Just because my hypothesis at the time was, okay, it's either oxygenated or vacuum sealed. And in no way, shape, or form did I think that this would be humans, more along the lines of psi assets that were being recruited into a program. I had no idea, and my mind was not even thinking close to that.
So you're jumping ahead a little bit on me there. I'm still keen to get the basics of the scene. So are they surprised to see you?
Very, very surprised.
So you've suddenly come across them in this clearing. They didn't know you were coming. How could they not have known you were coming if you'd been deployed by chopper? Surely they would have known there was a US vessel just off the coast. Surely they would have seen the Chinook or whatever type of helicopter it was that dropped you in the clearing.
Well, that's the thing that surprised me is, these things are very loud. CH-53E Super Stallions are very loud helicopters, so I don't think that they were expecting us to even go down to that kind of area, let alone, we're sticking to what we were doing, and at the same time, these guys are operating. It's a confusion on both parts, because that's the thing I don't understand.
Do you think you'd basically sprung them Essentially, they knew you were there, but they thought they could get away before you guys appeared.
That's what I'm estimating. I can't speak on their behalf because I don't know, but I would, if I was to say that, yeah, we definitely surprised them, and they probably tried to get out and clear their operations out before anybody was to have noticed.
Right. At no stage did they assert any kind of unit membership. They didn't say where they were from. They didn't endeavour to identify themselves in any way whatsoever.
Not whatsoever in any way, shape, or form at all.
Do you think you or your colleagues could identify the men that detained you? Were they with their faces fully visible?
I could provide sketches, but of course this happened over 15 years ago, right around 15 years ago. So, but I still remember what some of them look like, and that's something for me to sketch out if need be. I've already did this for AARO with certain people that I had talked to them about that they wanted sketches of just to make sure. And so that's easy for me to do.
So the implications of this craft, the technical abilities of this craft, there was no jet turbine that you could hear. There's no propellers, no visible means of propulsion that you could see.
No, not at all. Not whatsoever. And that was the thing, is I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I know exactly what we had in our arsenal as far as conventional aircraft, helicopters even. And this was nothing like I've ever seen before. And it was very eerie to see something that big that just seemed weightless, like it didn't weigh anything and it's floating there. And
And and I mean, essentially, the quantity of metal, whatever it was it metallic? Do you think the object that you were looking at?
I believe it was metallic because it was reflecting colors like light matte gray and a dark matte black. It was transitioning in between of those colors. And I mean, I don't know what kind of technology does that. I don't know if it's a specific design pattern to obscure radar or whatever it could be, or could camouflage. I mean, I have no idea. These are just speculations. But
But clearly, if that's metallic, with our prosaic technologies we normally have on this planet, it would be hundreds, if not thousands, of tons if it's 300 feet across.
absolutely,
And yet it's just floating there with
it's just
some
yes,
kind of some kind of deep noise, what a throb,
yes,
some kind. Is there anybody that you can see operating the craft?
not at all. Nope, not even on the platform. I don't recall seeing anybody getting out of the trucks. I don't remember seeing anybody standing on the platform. The only interaction with people that we've had were the ones that were searching us, and that was 8 people total.
Understood. Is there any windows, any kind of visible cockpit that you can see on the object?
Not at all. Nothing like that.
Do you see what's in the HVAC containers?
No, they don't see what's in them at all. They just load them onto this platform, and that's the last of it.
How
No,
long?
that I only recall seeing 4 containers
How long are they?
being loaded. They're like half of a shipping container. Like the type of trailers they had were smaller than normal, but they were enough to basically pull like a half of a shipping container, probably even smaller than that, and then with a HVAC system on top. They
Now
were
it's
also
interesting.
colored black.
It's interesting to me. Yeah, they're coloured black. Just give me a word picture of what you're looking at. This is very, very important to get a description of these containers. Talk me through what they look like.
Okay, so they look like like almost like a traditional shipping container. You can see like the back doors that open up. They look like they're a little bit more reinforced than what a normal shipping container were because they were smaller. Um, and then the HVAC system on the top was just cylindrical. It wasn't anything that was massive or something that it was noticeable, but it wasn't over the top, if that makes any sense, like as far as the size compared to the actual container itself.
So, what do you mean by HVAC? Can you explain that to our audience?
Oxygen system, heat and AC, something like that. That's what HVAC typically is.
Right. Is there any insignia on the side of the container?
Not at all. Nothing.
Do you see anybody opening or closing the containers?
Nope, didn't see any of that either.
Is anybody pushing any buttons or switches on the containers?
No, nothing.
Is it connected, anything electrically to it at all?
I don't remember seeing anything like that.
Are they making a noise? Do they have any kind of generator that's operating to keep them functioning?
I don't remember hearing anything like that. It's possible that that could have been going on too, but they were at a good distance. And then two, my focus was between two things that were more apparent than the containers. But I mean, it's certainly possible.
Now, you've obviously worked around Special Forces operators. You know how they move, you know the type of gear they use. Did you get the impression that these men, whoever they were, these 8 black clad paramilitaries with highly advanced weapons, that they were Special Forces operators?
The way that they moved and functioned, 100%. I didn't know specifically what type of special operations they did, but the way that they communicated, and I mean, not even amongst themselves, but just the way that they carried themselves, I should say, is something that's unconventional compared to what we would do.
Did they
You know,
have radar on their body?
they didn't have red at all. No.
So they're carrying standard weapons. Have they got web belts at all? Is there any belt around their waist?
Yeah, they have kind of like a belt, like a gun belt type of situation.
I want to come for a moment, Mike, to the containers. You and I both know Jake Barber, and Jake Barber has talked to you about the containers. Originally, you suspected, didn't you, that there was some kind of criminal drug smuggling or weapons smuggling operation going on involving those containers, didn't you?
Absolutely, that's exactly what I thought the first time, and
But
I testified.
you didn't see drugs and you didn't see any other weapons other than the weapons that the 8 paramilitaries were pointing at you.
That's correct. Yeah, I didn't see anything in the containers, and the only weapons I saw were what these guys were
What has
carrying.
Jake Barber told you about those containers?
Jake had told me that these are containers that they use to transfer psionic assets and also use them as kind of like a Faraday cage to do operations and to allow these psi assets to work. And what he has provided me was explanation as even having people in the United States get recruited into programs overseas in very spiritual areas in different parts of the world to basically recruit people that have this ability and offer them positions to work inside of these type of programs that utilize their skill sets. So those containers are used for them to work in, but also to transport them into different places to do operations in.
What is your understanding, Mike, of why they use those containers to transport what you now believe to be Indonesian people from Sumatra to presumably the United States?
Well, if you look at the type of device they were using to put these containers on, it's easier to get them in and out of places. Also, it, I would believe it's much safer for them instead of now. Granted, I've also heard that they transport them through conventional means like helicopters and containers pulling helicopters pulling these containers. But for something like this, I don't even think they would even know what they're being transported on. But my understanding is that these containers are also very safe for them to operate in. They're climate controlled. They make them pretty comfortable to transport, but also to do work in.
I guess it's also a way of keeping classified the technology that they were transporting them in, because presumably, if whoever it is that's operating this craft wants to keep it secret, the best way to do it is to keep somebody locked up inside a box.
Absolutely, and that's a perfect way of doing it. I mean, it makes perfect sense on why you would want to obfuscate that type of situation and make them say, "Oh yeah, get in the containers. We're going to just take you somewhere." And I don't, I've never been on something like that, so I can't say what it feels like. But I'm pretty sure that if it moves as quick as it did, and it's safe for them to survive, then I'm pretty sure it probably wouldn't feel much like anything being transported. It wouldn't be like driving over a bumpy road and knowing where you're going or trying to do terrain association off something like that. So even again, they probably don't even know where they're being taken to as well.
Can I ask you this? Were any of the faces of the men that detained you discernibly perhaps of Mexican or South
No,
American?
I don't
Okay.
remember seeing any of them. Yeah.
Was there any discussion at all about where the craft was going?
No, nothing like that.
Okay. What happens? They're presumably loading these containers with the F-150 trucks behind you or in front of you. What are these men doing while they detain you?
So they were searching our stuff. Now, granted, before we went to go investigate this, I had a little Panasonic camera, and I was taking video of some things. And when we turned around, I actually took some videos and some still shots of this and put it in my dump pouch, which a dump pouch is used to basically retain your magazines. So that way, when you come back to whatever you're doing, you load them back up and reuse them. So I put it in there. And so these guys were searching they took our weapons first and foremost, and they made sure that we weren't obviously a threat to them. They then took our magazines out of our pouches and dumped them onto the ground, and they kicked them off a little ways because there's a guy up front that has us sighted in at a standoff distance to basically, if we were to try to do anything, I'm pretty sure they would have done something about that. So they're going through our stuff. They checked our rigs, and then they got our IDs from our left breast pocket, and they had this device that looked similar to what I would call a BAT system, which is like a biometrics tracking system that we were trained on, and basically how to take inventory of people that we would come across. It was something very similar to that because they took our IDs and were trying to scan these, and it wasn't working. So they pulled out something else that looked like a modern day uh, smartphone that was very thin. And some people I've come in contact with told me that those are what are called CAVCOM devices that the CIA uses. And so when I described those devices, they said, yes, people in the CIA use those all the time, and especially in different countries. So again, these guys are very specialized. And if it's something that even former CIA operators are even telling me that that's the kind of stuff they used, then obviously there may be some ties to clandestine operations or clandestine groups within aerospace or even government that gives these people access to that kind of stuff.
What sort of questions are they asking you?
Who are you with? What's your why are you guys here? You guys shouldn't have came down here. They were asking questions like that, but then they were also stating that they could kill us. It was very stupid of us to go down there. We weren't allowed to be there. So they were like saying, should we smoke these guys? We could kill you very easily. It's very easy to get lost in the jungle. So they weren't asking specific questions. And I think that's why they were taking our stuff and looking at our IDs and trying to take pictures of those for whatever reasons they were doing that. But that's pretty much a majority of what they were saying was
So
just threats.
you mentioned that you'd taken photographs with your camera. When had you taken those photographs as you were approaching the object?
When we were on top of the hill, on that slope. That's when we were taking photos of this thing. And then, of
How
course, it
far
was
away?
obscured
How
because
far away were you at the time?
several hundred meters or so because the vegetation was obscuring this. I could only see like the middle section of this thing compared to
So
everything else.
did you get photographs of what could discernibly be perceived as a craft of some kind?
If people were to look at how abstract it was from our view, I don't know if people would say it would look like a craft. It could look like a building. It could be, some people would say it would look like a craft. From what I saw in its entirety when we were down there, that ended up being a craft. But the view that we had, it just looked very abstract and looked abnormal compared to anything else that was there. Never seen a building that looked anything like that.
So
Never seen.
you put that camera into your one of your magazine pouches. How did they miss it? Like why did they miss the pouch?
I have no idea. Either they were under also time constraints and they were more concerned about us having weapons. And I think that's the first thing that they did was disarm us because we're no longer a threat to them. And I think they may have had time constraints because of what, one, we saw, but two, maybe their operations were compromised because we were there or they were getting out because they had to go somewhere else. So again, it's speculation, but I think we may have compromised their operation to an extent.
So when they came upon you, did you just walk into them with their weapons, or did they spring you? How did it happen that they ambushed
They
you?
pretty, they pretty much sprung on us. They were like, if you had four on each side like this, they had interlocking fields of fire, which is essential because you don't need to use as much ammunition to take down a large force in front of you. The way we were positioned was like in a tactical column. That's typically how we go anywhere. So we're pretty much, like this in formation. So if they have interlocking fields of fire on an element that's shaped like this, and we're spaced maybe, 5 meters apart or so, you're gonna definitely not need to expend as much ammunition, and you can overwhelm a force with two different points of groups of people to take down a target. So when we saw them, they were already had us sighted, and they were already basically telling us to put our hands up and basically not grab our weapons at that point. So that's what made me think that they've done this quite a bit, and they were very skilled at it because the fact of how quick they did this. I mean, it was instantaneous. We didn't even see them. They were, they could have been crouched behind trees or, any kind of vegetation. But as soon as we got closer to it, at a certain point, they basically enveloped us and started yelling at us and basically telling us to keep our hands up.
So you didn't think of engaging?
We didn't have time to do that.
Yeah. I mean, were your weapons cocked? Or you weren't on ready or anything like that?
No.
So they're detaining you for 5 or 10 minutes. They're doing the biometric scanning. They're obviously getting all of your IDs. What happens?
So after that happens, essentially I'm looking at one of them because they're now on my right side with the other people that are there. And I saw something move out of the corner of my eye, and it ended up being that platform that craft is hovering over. And it lifted off the ground itself while the craft slowly also met with it at some point. And then when it joined together, as it's still rotating, mind you, it decided to raise up. And as that platform joined up with it, there were some lights that turned on to the corners of the craft. And the only lights I remember seeing was red, yellow, green, and blue.
Where are they placed, those lights? Do you remember where the red one was?
The very corner sections of the craft. So this is part of the craft on the corner. That's where the lights were.
And are they navigation lights, or do you think they're part of some kind of propulsion system?
I have no idea. I have no idea why you'd put lights on something like that. And clearly you don't need FAA regulations and something that travels that fast and something that nobody knows about. But I mean, unless they hide in plain sight and at nighttime they put FAA lights to make it look like it's something that's not different. But again, the shape of this thing was abnormal. I've never seen a circular octagonal craft. I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything move that fast. But as this thing is climbing up, an elevation, when it gets past the tree line and slightly above it, then all of a sudden it just darts off to the left, which is where the ocean is. And it just looked like a black blur. It was that fast. It was thousands of miles instantaneously that this thing did. It didn't break the sound barrier. It didn't produce any kind of rotor wash like a helicopter or a plane would flying, map of the earth and disturbing the trees. It didn't do anything like that. It didn't make any kind of pitch or sound different either. It just disappeared. It just flew. And that was very creepy to see. And at that point, after that thing took off, these guys end up telling us to turn around and face the hill. And at that point, I thought that was basically it for us, that they were going to either put a round in the back of our head and then that was it. But that didn't happen. And they just told us to start moving up the hill and don't look back at them. And, they kept, again, threatening us that if we were to look behind, they would kill us. They would shoot us. They could easily leave us here to die, things like that. So it was definitely not something I would ever encourage people to want to be a part of or partake in. But, it's something that for 15 years, it's been in the back of my mind. And it's something that I'm glad has gotten some traction for people who've experienced similar to come forward and talk.
When they tell you to turn and start walking away from them and not look back, where are your weapons?
So that was the thing. When we turned back, I remember facing the hill and I see a sling literally come over like this. And that was at the moment I thought, okay, they're going to try to strangle us with that or something like that. What they ended up doing was they positioned the weapons on our back that had the butt stock up here and the muzzle towards the left side that I remember. And they made it really, really tight to where if you tried to fumble with it, it's going to take you time to get that off of you. And then when they took our magazines, usually what we have is called brass to the grass. which allows us, when we pick out a magazine, we have the brass right here are the rounds, and then you stick it into the weapon and then hit the bolt release. When they put our magazines in, they put them basically brass to the sky. So if you were to grab it from the top, you're going to have to shift them to get to that good part and to put it in. So it would take time. Again, these guys knew what they were doing, putting these little obstacles in place just in case any of us tried to do something like that.
So you start walking up the hill, and for all you know, these guys are going to shoot you in the back or back of the head. Yeah. What happened?
So they told us to go up the hill. We're walking up. They're telling us not to look back. And we basically hightailed it as quick as we could going up there with our weapons slung on our backs and our magazines misplaced. All right, we still have our IDs, of course, because they put those back. And as soon as we broke the top near the slope where we originally were, we decided to run back to where the LZ was. And there was a gunnery sergeant there that had some materials like boxes. And I've never seen this guy before, but he was chewing us out because if you're a security element, you're not going to have your weapon slung on your back. You know, we look very odd when, why are we going to have weapons if we're going to have them slung on our backs and not utilize them? So that was kind of the situation. So we adjusted ourselves. We helped each other get them off our backs. And then we loaded them up and basically waited for the bird to basically pick us up and go back to the ship.
Did you tell the gunnery sergeant or anyone what had happened to you?
No chance in hell. Who's going to believe that?
Why not? I mean, this is you've been detained by a bunch of armed men who threatened to kill you. Isn't that a threat, a security threat for your operation?
Absolutely, 100%. But again, we could have gotten in trouble if we were found out to have basically vacated our AO to go basically investigate this. That's the other problem why people didn't want to talk about it.
So you were in breach of the obligations that you were under orders to do. You were meant to be securing the LZ. Technically, you'd left your area of operation.
Correct.
Where did the 8 paramilitaries go? Did you see where they went?
No. We didn't look back. As soon as we broke over that hill, we ran back to that LZ, and that was it. I wasn't, we were freaked out at that point, which anybody would be respectfully because it's not something you deal with. And I don't know who these guys are. And if we were to have alerted anybody, well, they already vacated the areas, they're not going to find anything. So it's just going to be, like the boy who cried wolf, for example.
I think a lot of people watching this might have trouble understanding why. Perhaps when you got back to your boat, you didn't go quietly and discreetly to your commanding officer and say, "Sir, this is really important. You need to know this. We've seen something quite disturbing." Why didn't you make it?
Well, for example, look how the public took this story. Look at it, even some government officials I've talked to have taken this story. It sounds unbelievable. I understand that 100%. So for them, I mean, I don't know if they would take it serious. They probably, you'd get yelled at or chewed out because it sounds crazy. And I understand that. So with, again, us being threatened, them taking photos of our IDs, them knowing who we are, and them also telling us not to talk about that, that is the other problem with this. This is a reason why people stay silent, because stuff will come back to haunt you. And for example, that camera that I talked about, when we got out of that area, went back to the ship, we did a briefing on the flight deck, and then we basically went back to the Philippines for Subic Bay for Liberty, and we had about 3 or 4 days off. My camera was locked in my locker on the ship. And when we got back the first night, I saw that camera laying on my rack, and it had the battery pulled out, and it had the memory card missing. So I had a spare battery, went into my locker, tried to, open it up, which my locker wasn't disturbed, by the way. The lock wasn't broken. Nothing was disturbed. And I saw my battery in there, so I took that and put it into the camera, and it wouldn't turn on. So I don't know who went on the ship at that point to sabotage the camera, but the Marines that were also with me, they had their phones missing too. And nobody else in the other platoon, as far as I'm aware of, had their stuff missing. It was just us who were there. So that was the other thing. Then when we got back to Japan, I got a notification from the duty that knocked on my door and said that I had to report to the CP, which is a command post. And I go running up there, and there's nobody there. except for a guy who comes out and he's wearing Air Force dress blues with no name tag and is wearing the rank of lieutenant colonel. And he tells me to go inside and sit down. So he commandeers an office and he slides this paper in front of me and tells me that I can't talk about anything like this, that you could get charged for treason, you could get executed, basically saying things that would try to steer us from talking about it. So I signed the paper. The only things I remember seeing on the paper was TSSCI and Indonesia. Those are the only things I remember seeing. I remember putting my social security number down, and I remember putting my first and last name and then signing it. And after that happened, I got the hell out of there. And the other guys also suffered the same fate with having to sign the same paperwork. And they didn't describe who made them sign it, because after that point, I asked one of them, "Did you have to sign something?" And they said, and all they did was just shake their head. And after that point, we never talked about it.
Well, that was my next question. Did you talk about this with your members of your unit? Did all of you talk about what you'd seen?
Nope. They tried to forget about it.
You're kidding. I mean, I find it amazing. I mean, you've just seen a highly advanced craft that defies known human technology, conventional technology. I mean, I would have talked about it, wouldn't you?
Not threaten at gunpoint, not having these people come harass you like that and know where you're at, and then have you sign stuff on that. No, it was way too crazy, and it was way too scary for something like that to happen. And
so you were genuinely fearful for your life.
100%.
Now, the fact that somebody was able to get into your locker without breaking into it on the ship, and subsequently able to get into the base and into the costume or the uniform of a lieutenant colonel, they were able to pass themselves off as somebody who was an authorized officer to be in that space. This implies very strongly that the operation that you witnessed was linked in some way to members of the US military, correct?
Correct. I'm assuming that's the case, because how do they have these resources and how are they able to pull that kind of logistics off? It takes a lot of moving parts. So somebody knows something.
So this was not any form of known conventional technology. This wasn't a jet aircraft. It wasn't a turbine of some kind, a rocket. There wasn't the conventional kind of propulsion system that you would expect to see. By the kind of propulsion system you're describing, it sounds almost like some kind of electromagnetic or anti-gravitic system. True?
True, and that the way this thing moved, instantaneous acceleration, not any kind of conventional means of air propulsion like we have with our standard aircraft. Nothing like that registered that this was something that, had traditional propulsion. This was something completely different. It was, besides the audible hum, it didn't produce any noise. Very silent.
I'm inviting you to speculate here, Michael, because I appreciate you may not know. Why would a covert military operation with this kind of highly advanced technology use a craft like that to presumably go and pick up a bunch of people from Sumatra? Why not just put them on a conventional aircraft and fly them to the United States?
That I have no clue. And again, I would think it was easier to do something like that, unless these people are being flown to some part of the world, maybe that they need to get to very quickly. And that's my understanding, as far as if that's really the case. I mean, I don't know. I think it's very odd what happened, and I frankly, I wish it never did happen. I wish that this, it's not something cool to talk about, and it's not something that has made my life better. And it's something that I think is getting traction in other ways because of people like Jake, as far as people also that are not named, that have been helping me out as well with the understanding of things like this.
Have you benefited in any way from telling this story? Have you been paid? Have you been invited to places and flown on airplanes or anything like that? Has there been any kind of contra or benefit in kind that you've derived from talking about this story?
No, when I take meetings in DC, that's all done off, our dime, which we get people that help us out with that. If I've done a documentary or have people that interview me, I don't get paid for that. I don't have any revenue generated for this. And one, I don't want to. I don't, it's almost like, if somebody was to ask me to be a ghost hunter and go investigate their house and now I charge them $2,000 to do it to not produce a result, I mean, I'm a businessman at the end of the day, but at the same time, I don't want people sitting there to have to pay for something to know the truth. I want people to just understand the situation. And if there's more people coming down the pipeline that have similar things that have happened, and I've had people reach out to me since I came forward. And now that I have a public account on Twitter or X, I've had people reach out to me explaining their situations. And there is quite a few people who have had some similar stuff happen to them on US soil and not even overseas. Then I've had people that saw stuff during Desert Storm that was very strange to them. And I've had people that want me to basically facilitate meetings with them, getting in front of people who are studying that are supposed to investigate this in the government. They want me to get them in touch with these people so that way they can testify and tell their story as well.
Now, you've got, presumably you were part of a team of how many people when you were detained by these paramilitaries?
I had 6 guys, including myself, that were with me.
Have any of the other 5 men that were with you on that day corroborated your story?
Behind the scenes, I've had some messages that were sent to me because I asked one of them to help me out with this, and he agreed not to. And he basically told me to shut up and not to bother him about it. And that was a message that I sent over to Set Intel. When I came out on Sean Ryan, one of them also hit me up through email and then basically thanked me for getting the word out. And I have receipts of all this stuff, So there's 2 acknowledgments. Like, why would one guy be thanking me for getting the word out? For what?
You've spoken to AARO, and that was during the era of Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick and I think also the Deputy Tim Phillips. Were you fairly treated by AARO? Did they give you a fair hearing?
I believe they did. I believe that they, a couple people in that skiff with me were very serious about it, and they were very helpful. As far as the direction that the director at the time, whatever he did with it is up to what they were doing.
But did you get the impression that they were genuinely trying to investigate this in an authentic way?
Not everybody. Maybe 1 or 2 people in that skiff with me, I had a good read that were serious about it. I'm still in contact with those 2 people today, and I've relayed them some information as far as what things have been passed to me, so they have a better understanding. So if there's a collection of reports on this, I'm trying to add more to it, just to say, hey, here's another instance, or hey, this might be the reason why. Especially when Jake came forward and when I was talking with Jake and things like that, that was something I relayed to some people, and even him providing people that he's talked to in government, telling them what I experienced and putting his parts onto it as far as why, that kind of made them open their eyes to a lot.
So Jake's basically told them that the containers that you're describing are the containers that he's seen in the location known as the Range, which is a euphemism for a particular national security location. He identifies that as a container that is used for transporting psionics.
Correct.
Have you spoken to the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence?
Yes, numerous times.
How many times have they interviewed you?
I went there the 1 time for AARO and then 2 times after last year.
Have you named all of the members of the squad that you were with that day and identified them to the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence? And do you know whether any of those people have been subpoenaed?
They have not been subpoenaed. They have not. And I provided that information to Senate Select. I provided that to Senate Armed Services, and I provided that to AARO, the people that were with me.
So presumably these Senate committees have the power to call people under subpoena and bring them, if necessary, under duress to give evidence as witnesses, correct?
Yes.
Why hasn't that happened? Have you been given any explanation as to why the Senate Intelligence or the Senate Armed Services Committee or AARO haven't compelled these witnesses to appear?
Well, one, there's been some things that relate to me that saying that we were incidental witnesses, like we don't have proof of what happened. They're more interested in people that were hands-on with this stuff that worked in laboratories or, crash retrieval. They're
Sorry,
more
that's a
worried
load of
about
horse.
that.
I don't buy that. Bottom line is,
I
you
don't
guys have
either. I
your
don't either.
direct first-hand witnesses to a craft being operated presumably under the knowledge and control of the United States military or intelligence community. Your witnesses, your direct witnesses, multiple
Absolutely.
corroborative. I just don't
Yeah.
understand why. Here we have politicians at the moment asserting that there is no direct first-hand witnesses to this kind of technology. What the hell's going on? Because you've given that evidence to the Senate. You've given that
I
evidence.
have. And you want to know something? I have been calling for myself to be put on Capitol Hill to testify in front of Congress to do this. I have been asking for that. I have put my name numerous times in the hat to be considered to go on to Capitol Hill to testify this. And you know what I hear? I hear crickets. This is the reason why I get discouraged sometimes, because what I've been able to provide is a missing link to how some of this stuff happens. Unknowingly, I didn't know that this was going to be something to generate that, but it has behind the scenes. I've had numerous people I met with in the government, with intelligence communities, within special operations, you name it, people that are working in this kind of industry, if you even want to call it that, have provided me insight as to why stuff like this happens, or they've personally known people who have been a part of operations similar to that to an extent as private military contractors. So being able to be on the side of where I'm somebody who's not working a part of a program like that, who's never been in any kind of clandestine operation besides being an incidental witness, I was happy to provide my story as a sense to put together the missing link to an extent of how people are getting these materials, what the psionic aspects in the programs are, and what they're utilized to do. I had no idea that this was going to bring forward that kind of information behind the scenes. So I've been asking to testify. I hope this next round of hearings that comes about, rumored in September, I hope that I get to be called up there, because I will tell my story, and I want to tell it as I've told everybody else for the last couple of years. And I want Congress and I want Senate and I want everybody to understand that this is a serious issue. And I hope that no other service member in any military branch ever experiences the same thing. At the same time, I think that humanity is being cheated by these kind of technologies, which we could all benefit from and be better people together in the process.
You would testify under oath. You'd be prepared to swear an oath that anything that you said would be subject to perjury prosecution if you could be proven to have lied?
Correct. 100%. And I signed the paperwork going into AARO and Senate Intel stating the same thing when I testified to them.
So I'm struggling here. I mean, I'm actually really interested in the fact that you've recently spoken out and said that you would almost discourage other whistleblowers from coming forward in the current context of how Congress particularly is responding. There's a lot of bleating from politicians in Congress that they want whistleblowers to come forward, first-hand whistleblowers. Would you do that again if you were asked?
I would. And to clarify that video that I put out, I'm not discouraging people to come forward. I want people to assess whether or not it's going to be worth it, because people I know who have came forward and provided actionable intelligence on programs such as locations where materials are, where biologics are stored, they have that information and they've had that information for almost 3 years, but yet no member of Congress has actively looked into it or put together any kind of power at B to actually go investigate these things and go to these locations and do so. So
Yeah.
why would I want somebody who has the goods to sit there and just be ignored while exposing themselves to the world, just to be, one, ridiculed, two, you're blacklisted from working this kind of stuff ever again, so you lose your income. You have no
Yeah.
means to provide from your family at that point, and you're also under a microscope because you're severely threatened, because you're somebody who basically turned against the people that provided you the things, as long as you played the game that they had. And I'm tired of seeing whistleblowers come forward and get treated this way, like it's an amusement. I'm sick of seeing that kind of stuff. So I want people to assess right now. And now, if Congress and Senate had their stuff together, they had funding for people trying to transition out of that part, get them to where they can still provide for their families, or give them some sort of work to where they can still provide, while also spilling the beans and giving the evidence and being treated accordingly as patriots, that would be something that, okay, yeah, definitely go talk to these people and come forward because they will take care of you. So far, I've not seen anybody take care of. I've had myself and other people have testified to AARO, to Senate Intel, have their lives destroyed, frankly.
Have you been threatened? Has there been any kind of intimidation of you because you've spoken out?
Yes, I was intimidated. I had surveillance. I had threats. I've had weird stuff sent to my house.
Like what?
I've
Like what has happened?
photographs of me. That was very odd and that was freaky. So I notified people of that
Photographs of you where doing what? Sorry.
at work, like driving to work.
So basically, somebody's had you under surveillance. They're basically saying we're watching you.
Yeah. And then I've had helicopters that have literally hovered over my father's residence, my residence, and my business at the time. I had them circling above and literally I have Flight Radar 24 is one app I was provided. Um, and when I was able to do that, I could see if there were helicopters that were all of a sudden appearing. And usually the conventional stuff would register on that device, but these aircraft were not. They were ghost aircrafts.
Mike, it feels to me we're all being played, that there are some well motivated politicians in Congress who are trying to do the right thing, but that to a large degree, the treatment of whistleblowers by some of the congressional committee people is reprehensible. Do you agree?
I agree 100%. And to make it clear, I'm working with some of these politicians that want to get the answers and want to do the right thing. But I also know the key players in some of these positions who are also placed there to prevent whistleblowers from doing anything or preventing committees from doing something. And the truth is about to come out on that. And if there's senators that, that I've talked, I've at least passed information to that are very well versed in this subject because they've been investigating this for the past couple of years. They have a good idea. But the problem is people higher than them are putting their, foot on their necks, prevent them from doing anything. And that's frustrating.
You mentioned that people from AARO were asking you specific questions and indeed showing you photographs. What photographs were they showing you?
So they weren't showing me photographs per se of like the events. They were showing me photographs of the terrain out there. Because what I was trying to do is figure specifically where in Indonesia we were taken to that was where I could recall. And that's the biggest thing. I provided them sketches. I provided them, my details to basically say, hey, um, this is what they look like. This is like the sketches of the people that I saw as far as the lieutenant colonel, for example. I provided a sketch to that. I provided a sketch to the admiral that debriefed us. And I provided them all the details from start to finish on that. And the
So
thing that I,
who was the admiral? You haven't mentioned the admiral that debriefed you. What's that?
Admiral, so he was the one that debriefed us after that operation as far as the humanitarian assistance.
Did you tell
Which
him? Did you tell him at all about what had happened?
Oh, I never talked to that guy, but they wanted to know key players like the CEO of the ship, the XO of the ship, if there was anybody else along that echelon that was, you know, there on that operation. And he was the one that stuck out. So I had some people, because I didn't know who this guy was, I had some people that found out who this admiral is. And then they sent me that information. And then I forwarded it over to Senate Intel and to AARO after the fact.
Right. So I'm trying to understand what the motivations are of AARO. I'm told there are some good people in AARO, particularly now under the new leadership of John Kozlowski, who are determined to try and get to the truth. Did you get the impression that they were playing pretty straight with you and trying to get answers?
Two of the people. Granted, one of the people that was there was not necessarily in the duty of AARO, but the main gentleman I talked to that was an AARO, aside from Kirkpatrick, was taking this very seriously.
What about the FBI team? Have the FBI approached you at all?
I had Department of Homeland Security approach me.
And have you given a statement to Department of Homeland Security?
Yes, I gave the agents that I talked to because of the human, which they were saying is a human trafficking aspect. So they wanted to do the criminality part of it, and so I talked to them about it. And one of the things is they know that happens all the time as far as in that part of the world. But when you tell them that there's this technology associated with it, which some of these guys happen to be believers of the phenomenon. They've seen stuff themselves as federal agents that have made them understand that this is a real situation. And that's kind of why they wanted to get onto the bottom of that. I've had people in other agencies that I've talked to that, they haven't gotten it on record, but they were picking my brain and I was picking their brain to figure out, like, hey, have you heard of anything like this happening, even a clandestine side of things? And some of them said yes. Some of them said no, which is understandable. But there's acknowledgement, which I think if this wasn't real as far as a phenomenon or anything like this, or private military contractors working for aerospace companies that have these technologies, apparently that's old news. Apparently that's been going on for a very long time.
Have you heard any information at all about the aerospace company that is responsible for the building of that technology? From what you're telling me, it's not a non-human craft, it's a constructed human terrestrially manufactured craft. Do you know anything at all about the aerospace company allegedly linked to that object?
I don't know anything, what company it would be. I've got my speculations on that, but again, from my understanding, a lot of these aerospace companies have their own stuff, and they have stuff they siphoned off the black budget to get funding for stuff like this, and they have crash recovery teams of non-human intelligence to go or retrieve biologics and that kind of stuff. And so whether because that was one of the things that Jake told me when I talked to him the first time, at least privately when I met him, and I also went to a facility and saw what that was, and that kind of stuff. Um, at that point, he had told me that there was a craft that they recovered that was octagonal, that looked strikingly similar to what I sketched and what I had put out publicly, that he recovered. And that also made the speculation that I think they reproduce these vehicles to give like different models or different scales of ones that they've actually recovered and try to see if they're similar. I mean, that's again speculation, but I think it's weird because I've never seen anybody report an octagonal craft being sighted like in like how we saw it. I've seen people have thought, well, it's a circular design or it may look hexagonal or something like that. Mostly they're circular or triangular, but I've never seen anybody specify that was octagonal until I came forward. Then people were like, I've seen that craft, which again, I don't know if they have.
The key thing for me, the key takeaway that I get from your story, Mike, is if you are telling the truth, and I think you are, the United States or sections of the United States military and probably a private aerospace company or companies are operating highly advanced, possibly anti-gravitic electromagnetic technology that they've been able, presumably, to perhaps reverse engineer, or they've made some kind of incredible advanced propulsion breakthrough that is not being disclosed to the public.
It's 100% true. I'm not going to give specifics, but I've been in contact with engineers of these programs who have built some of these things, and they want to come forward to an extent. But I am kind of telling people to kind of put that off and put in the back of your mind until there are systems in place that can help out. And these are people that are hands on. And they were very specific with what they were doing. I saw their credentials. They've sent me, documents that could prove what they're talking about to an extent, which I'm keeping a tight lid on because I want people to understand that it's not just us as incidental witnesses that are affected by this. This is affecting everybody that want to come forward or that are in these programs that they believe that we as humans have a right to this kind of stuff, that it shouldn't be in, guise of national security when it isn't. And the fact is that people are losing their lives over this subject or over participating. People are having their lives ruined and people are having their families threatened, which is the worst thing on top of it too. So there's a big problem that we have here. And I hope that Congress and Senate get their stuff together so that way they can get protections in place. And I'm talking about physical protections. I'm not talking about just, oh, there's a law. It's like a restraining order, for example. It's just a piece of paper. It doesn't stop somebody from wanting to go acquire a firearm and go do harm. It's just a piece of paper at the end of the day. There's no physical restraints to do so unless they're locked up. But I'm talking about physical protection for these people to do the right thing and for their safeguard. I think if that was treated better, and I think that people were also provided that the resources to basically still provide for their families, I think that this thing would have jumped light years ahead of actually this could have been solved within 18 months, not to mention the people I know that have testified that provided locations, for
I know
example.
that's the thing I find frustrating is that there are these representations being made by some in Congress that direct first person evidence hasn't been provided. Jake Barber's evidence is direct first person evidence, and I know of multiple people who I've assisted to come forward to those committees, and they've provided direct evidence of the program. What I think is the problem is that there are some in Congress who are just playing with us right now.
Absolutely. And I feel the same way, whether it's a paid incentive for them, but the dam has to break at some point. There has to be some point where this bottleneck is stretched and it ruptures, and there's overwhelming amount of evidence that is supported by people coming forward and taking a stand. And it's a frustrating thing is I hate people seeing seeing them destroy their lives because they want to do the right thing, but they have no support from top cover. It's very frustrating.
Have you ever met Jonathan Wygant, who tells a very similar story to yours about an incident that took place in Peru when he was a Marine based there?
I'm in communication with Jonathan. We talk quite a bit. I've helped him get in touch with certain people. That way he can also be a part of it, but his life's been ruined of it. The people that he served with during this event also talked negative about him, saying that he was a druggie and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh well, I've been to fame too, so we're in the same club, buddy. But he's a guy personally that I would like to help as well, and I've been trying to do so. And I'm glad that he's okay, and I'm glad that he's safe. And I've had people on the back end confirm logistically that did happen. Which when I got that news, I called him up and I told him what I heard. So he was very thrilled to hear that. But he was in a very worse situation compared to me. And I'm not going to go into details because he asked me not to provide those details. But let's just say that he is somebody that wasn't treated nicely by this organization. And I found out also that Department of Energy may have played a role into that, and they have their own private military contractors that conceal stuff or go retrieve things, which is not a
That was
surprise.
that was what interested me about the Wygant case, is that what he describes are black-clad paramilitaries with highly advanced weapons, except in their case, a couple of them had jackets with DOE, Department of Energy, very helpfully written on the back.
Yep, and that's the thing is, there's a lot of these organizations that have contractors who go do the dirty work, and the executives don't have to know anything about it specifically except for the task being completed. So it's a very complex entity, or if you want to call it a system where they can facilitate these things, but it's a very real thing. They've got their stuff together, and these people in these programs that facilitate these operations are geniuses. They're very smart people, but at the end of the day, we had to kind of figure out why they want to keep it secret, whether it's a technology monopoly that they're worried about leaking out, and then whether or not it's the oil tycoons or the people that are, own the oil industry that put people in positions and fund them and try to bribe them or coerce them or threaten them to not leak it because these people would lose all that money. But at the end of the day, if we were to have technologies like this to help ourselves, my theory with this is that humanity would elevate itself. We would be better people because our consciousness would be heightened. And if you have a higher consciousness, I don't think you want to go pick a fight over with somebody over $20 of something, right? Or go steal their shoes. You're like, oh, that's just a waste of time. So I think we would be better people at the end of the day if we were to actually have this technology. And I hope that's the case, and I hope it does come out. And I hope that more specifically the medical technologies that could thrive from this that I've been exposed to, I want that to be more mainstream because we could live healthier and we could live longer and we could live happier at the end of the day.
Why do you think this technology is being suppressed?
I think it's corporate greed for one, and I think it's also power and control. because some of these people that are in these positions are psychopaths or sociopaths, and they're on the opposite spectrum of utilizing those skills for benefit. So I think that what they're doing is just they want to have the goods and nobody else, and they want to be the kings on top of the hill while everybody else has no clue what's going on. And I think that that's something that motivates them, seeing people suffer. And I'm hoping that that gets put to a stop one day.
Well, Michael Herrera, something tells me truth will out. Truth has a way of wriggling its way to the surface. So I sincerely hope that you do get the chance to testify later this year. I, for one, would certainly like to see you put under oath and people subpoenaed to see whether they support or dispute your story. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
And before we go, please don't forget we do our weekly question and answer, and we need your questions. So please send your questions in by email to realitycheck@newsnationnow.com. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.